online too.
Very good. I believe we are all set.
Okay.
You may begin.
All right, great. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our fourth SWAG meeting of the year, our last SWAG meeting of this year. Thank you so much for coming. I wanted to start by just doing a brief round of introductions. So I'll start. My name's Andrea Miko, co-chair of the SWAG and a Portsmouth resident, and I'll pass it this way.
I'm Vince Lombardi, City Councilor.
Mason Caceres, Assistant Water Resource Manager for the City of Portsmouth.
Rich Blaylock, City Councilor.
Patrick Homan, Portsmouth President. Kim McNamara, Public Health Director, Portsmouth.
Rich Timo, Portsmouth resident.
Stephanie Secord, Public Information Officer and Scribe for SWAG.
And Al Pratt, Water Resource Manager for the city.
Hi, Jim Hewitt, Planning Board member.
Great. And then the next thing we have to do is approve our minutes from the last meeting. And so I sent everyone a draft of those in your email. And I would just need a motion to, if anyone didn't have any changes, which I didn't receive any, I would just need a motion to adopt those minutes.
Move to adopt.
Okay, and a second. Okay. Is everyone in favor of adopting the minutes from the September SWAG meeting?
Yes. Yes.
And are there anyone who's opposed? Looks like that's a no, so we'll go ahead and we'll adopt those minutes. Okay, great. So then we can go ahead and get into our agenda. The first item, or I guess the second item on our agenda, is to just update everyone about our co-chair situation. I think most of you know that Brian Getz, the former Deputy Director of DPW, has moved on to a position in Rye. And so we now have Al Pratt as our co-chair. And I just, Brian was on vacation at their last SWAG meeting in September. So we didn't really get to give him a formal send-off or goodbye, but I just wanted to acknowledge that Brian did an amazing job in the city of Portsmouth and did a lot for the Peace water system and the PFAS, as well as many other things that he did. And I enjoyed working with him, and I am sad to see him go. And so I'm sad that he's gone, but I'm also grateful that we have Al and his stepping into his shoes, and he's going to co-chair the SWAG. And Al is also wonderful and does a great job and very knowledgeable. And so glad that we have an easy transition with Brian leaving. So anyways, just wanted to acknowledge Brian's service to the city, thank him, and say that we're sad to see him go. But welcome, Al, and we're looking forward to working with you.
I think it's going to be big shoes to fill. In my next.
So with that, we can move on to the next topic. Yeah, there we go. Okay, great. So we've talked about updating our mission, or the idea of updating our mission, a couple times. We didn't address it last time because we had a site visit or a field trip, and then also Brian wasn't here. But our current mission, as we've talked about, is to review and communicate the latest science on the health and environmental effects of PFAS, to monitor federal and state legislative changes, and to anticipate policy changes that could impact the city of Portsmouth. This mission was written in 2020, so quite a while ago, and it was, what really helped form this initial SWAG. But since then, we have certainly evolved and have consistently covered other topics. And I just want to point out that in our report to City Council earlier this year, we did say it is important to note that the SWAG meetings have consistently covered topics on the city's water quantity, quality, preservation, and conservation efforts, and projects pertaining to the water master planning through the city's annual capital improvement plan process and other engineering studies. And so if you go to the next slide, we have talked about revising our mission to essentially just kind of marry those two together, our current mission, but add in the sentence about how we have consistently covered these other topics. And I think that would just help bring our mission to be more accurate and reflect the work that we actually are doing. And so I would like to propose that we as a group revise our mission to be this mission here. And and so I would like to know if anyone has any objections to that, any thoughts or concerns, and if not, we could take a vote to do that, and then we can talk about kind of what the next steps would be.
And I think it's a good opportunity now to talk about what this group is. We're halfway through our 2-year cycle here. Looking forward, now is a good time to start thinking about what this group has been doing and what you think it should be doing. I think that was sort of the impetus for this, to kind of be more accurate in what the mission is, kind of aligning with what we've been doing. We are in that cycle where revising the mission halfway through a session here is a bit of a process. I believe it needs to go to council and then potentially referred to governance council and back to council. As a process to get the mission changed. Where I was told if it waits till the renewal, it'd be an easier process.
Okay.
So that's something to consider, but you know, whatever we want to do, I think it's a good opportunity to just discuss what you want to do here. If you look at that first sentence, you know, what the original mission was, there's some good parts of that, you know, that would be good to delve into a little bit more. The problem with it is that I don't have the background to be able to present on these things. So it's requiring, you know, outside help, EPA, somebody to come in to talk about bigger policy and standards. And this first part was written before there was a state standard. Now the state standard now is an EPA standard. So a lot has happened since then. Even potentially revising that first sentence if we wanted to. I don't know. I just want to make sure that we can have this discussion about the vision as we move forward. You know, I'm happy. It's a great conduit for us to talk about the water supply. It's, in our sense, this is sort of a public outreach arm. You know, we post all these meetings. It's our chance to talk about the water system and the projects that we're doing that's important to us. So, you know, but
Just a comment. I like the mission statement, but I have a bias. And it's a public health bias. And I like to see in that second sentence, the topics on the city's water quality preservation, conservation, and the public health aspects related to the city's water quality. I think it all comes down to public health. More than resource, obviously there's resource issues that we have, but the major thrust is public health.
you know, we might be able to, given this out, have a sentence focused on the quantity and source protection, and then have another sentence that focuses on the quality of the water. Because there have been different topics that we've covered along those lines of time.
Yeah, and to your point too, Al, about talking about environmental effects and health effects, we have brought in speakers to help us. Well, we have Dr. Laurel Schrader from South Springs who sits on our swag. She's our environmental scientist. And we have also brought in, you know, like, for example, Dr. Jonathan Patali from New Hampshire DES, who's a toxicologist. So we have, I think you're right, in some regards, not everyone on the swag may have the ability, but we certainly have brought in guest speakers to help elaborate on further discussion. So I wouldn't want to limit the mission because we may not have the expertise when we have the ability to pull in those experts when
Totally
needed.
agree. Totally agree. I think that we should do that more.
I guess when I think about water for Portsmouth, I think about the whole cycle water goes through, including, you know, the groundwater, wastewater, and this. And I mean, I don't think it's appropriate for this committee necessarily to consider all of that, but just what I was mentioning earlier about people dumping paint and stuff like that. I wonder if more interest in groundwater specifically might be appropriate. And, you know, again, I'm hesitant to add more weight on staff, you know, because I know there's a whole thing. I don't know how much you're involved in the groundwater enterprise thing, but you know, it's yet another aspect that I wonder about, and wastewater too. But that's
All that great groundwater stuff. Our sources, if we ventured into private wells, that's a whole other thing, which we actually had some presentation on private wells and private well studies. So.
I saw Kim, and then we'll go to Councilor Blaylock.
I also am concerned about mission creep, and I don't want to start that, so it's fine to rein me in, but I have, I think, thoughts similar to Rich's. One of the things that's desperately needed is public education on how to protect water supply, and it's everything from dumping to plastics in our environment to, drought. I mean, there's just a whole lot of public education that we should at least support if we can't pull it together and do it ourselves. But I would like to see more of that started so everybody can do their best to protect the water supply. And I think we're reaching out to academic centers is a little bit better probably than EPA and other government centers, just because they're hopefully more science-based and public health-based and not political. And then I also just wondered, I don't know, but is it appropriate for this group to discuss equity in water issues? You know, we have populations in Portsmouth that they have access to good water that comes through the city water supply, but they may not have access to cooling in our heating environment equitably. So I don't know if that's something for this group to at least discuss. Maybe be a little proactive, not just monitor what's going on, but if there's an issue that comes up that's really vital to water, maybe feel a little bit freer to be proactive and reach out to the legislative committee that the city has, or reach out to legislators. I don't think that we can take on a lot of policy, push, but if we come across something, I don't think we just monitor and wait for it. I think we maybe be vocal about it. Those are my thoughts.
Councilor Blaylock, then I'll head to you.
I love all of this. I think this is all wonderful, and I definitely think, this all is involved in safe water, obviously, and providing, keeping town, health is the main priority. I'm careful, sensitive about creating a bunch of red tape for meetings. I think, I don't know if that would, all the red tape, if that would actually change what we would actually do, accomplish our 4 meetings in the next year, say. I'm also sensitive that we have a conservation commission, we have a trees and greenery group, we have a sustainability committee, I've got a health department is here for this group. But yeah, just some thoughts, I don't want to run it too big where we're not, you know what I mean? We do only have 4 meetings a year. I think education is the big thing.
We'll go to Jim and then Katrin.
Yes, people are concerned about how big, scope creep or what have you. If you just add one word after cities, you just say drinking. Just concerned about the city's drinking water. Surface water, storm water, wastewater. That would just narrow our focus.
I was going to say something along those lines, and then also as well, I agree with the public health comment, but when I read the word quality, maybe it's because I'm too close to it, but I think automatically human and environmental quality, so or human and environmental health. So I feel like that comes underneath that automatically, but. Yeah, I wasn't proposing any changes to the statement. It was just I was trying to get at sort of the direction that I'd like to see things going with that statement.
Well, it sounds like we got some really great feedback, and maybe Alec and I can go back and rework even this proposed mission, and I think it's something we'll have to talk about at our next meeting.
We can send it out in between meetings just so people see it and continue.
Yeah. Okay, sounds good. Well, I say thank you very much for all the thoughtful feedback. Al and I will take this back, revise it, send a new draft, and we can talk about it again at our next meeting, which will be sometime in March next year. We don't have a date yet, but.
It's good to have these different topics and stuff to write on this. We're looking for new ideas and topics. It's going to be a lot of repeats of what we've been talking about.
All right, thank you. All right, so we can move on to the next item, which I believe is
Water supply update is the same format as what Ryan has done many times, just with a new little twist now that we are in a drought. I wanted to kind of talk about this in the context that we are still in a drought, and it's kind of unusual to have a drought this time of year. Are improving, but talk through sort of the way that we use all these factors that we're looking at all the time just for our water supply update, tracking water supply conditions, how we look at these in terms of drought. We are always looking every Thursday, US Drought Monitor comes out with a new map of what the drought looks like around the country. I did that. We're looking at precipitation records. We use precipitation gauge right at Pease that has a long-term record to compare now with the past 50 years. The reservoir conditions, we have a gauge right at the reservoir, as you saw, stream flow, groundwater levels, system demand, system capacity. So all these factors go into how much water do we have, are we looking, future. We used to incorporate this matrix in our water supply update. It's kind of confusing, so we don't do it anymore, but we are considering all of these factors as sort of a lead up to, do we need to put water use restrictions on our conditions? So we're monitoring these things as conditions of all these factors get worse, it may trigger, okay, now we need to put water use restrictions on. So each of the factors, and I'll walk through these, we have different categories. Some of them are statistically based. History, look at where our current levels are, where they're at, to give them that ranking. I just wanted to show this graphic. Ultimately, what we end up doing is, do we need to put water restrictions on or not, or how it should be. Going through this process routinely catches us, so we can start with the voluntary restrictions, which isn't usually very effective, but at least it's a red flag to let people know that it get worse. And then that goes into the even watering days, what side of the street you live on, can you water or not, to less frequent, to ultimately, like we had in 2016, no outdoor watering. So starting with the US Drought Monitor that comes out every Thursday, this is the latest one for the whole country. It comes out, it's put together by the National Drought Mitigation Committee out of Nebraska. They work with NOAA and USDA and Department of Commerce, I believe, to put together these maps. And they're looking at similar factors that we use when we're looking at our conditions. They add some other things like soil moisture and vegetation stress and some other things we don't use. But you see, currently there's a lot of drought across the country, especially Massachusetts is still in extreme drought. This is December 3rd data. And this is the current condition in New Hampshire. We are in an extreme drought still in this area. Moderate drought everywhere else. Even with the rain that we received last year. And that's primarily one of the factors that I believe is weighing on this a lot is groundwater levels. Since we were dry for so long, groundwater levels are generally lower. It's a factor that goes into this consideration.
So does usage affect that? So it's not just what doesn't fall from the sky, it's also how much we're taking out?
Nope, it has nothing to do with taking down. It's all just how much falls from the sky, what the groundwater levels are, surface water flow, soil moisture, humidity, crop stress, those 7 factors. Here's our record of precipitation. This is just for the past year compared to the 24. The blue lines are the 24-year median precipitation levels, are generally the average levels for each of the months. And the red lines are this year. So we started off November, December, January, doing pretty well. We had a good March. Both February, very sporadic if you cut it up by month, generally average. And then if you look at that in the last part of the year, from April to October, it's been a lot lower than normal, especially in September and October. And we're feeling that, and that was the reason why we're in the drought. Conditions are so bad right now. So we're now at 83% of the annual average, so that's 17% below normal this time of year. I did a quick check in 2016, this time of year, right before it rained in 2016, that extreme drought period, we were 25% below normal, just for reference. how bad we are. This is the reservoir water levels, so our surface water conditions, and you can see that when the water levels dropped, and the drought of 2016, the drought of 2020, the drought of 2022, and then we're in the drought now, though the water level of the reservoir has come up quite a bit, and now we're about 3 inches below the spillway, so we're right near the top right now. That's come up because of the rain, and it's one good thing about the surface water, you get this immediate recharge when we have the rain. So we're seeing that there. So yeah, it's like, it is interesting though how frequently we've had droughts. I have a model that predicts back through time to kind of see what the water level might have been, based on precipitation rates over time. And there are, every 5 or 6 years, there seems to be low levels like this. It's not that unusual that we're seeing this. Stream flow is an indicator of how much recharge is actually making to the surface water. We use the gauge in Oyster River since that's a USGS gauged station. But it's very similar to the Bellamy Reservoir since they're similar, different sizes, but similar development and general quality. You see on the person here, so 2024, starting here, we were above average, kind of stayed in the green. So the way this chart is, the green is sort of a normal historic based on the past 20 years. Makes the record. Like the record, 80 to 90 years record. The green is your normal stream flow in the Oyster River. The black line that's zigzagging through that is this current year's current flow. As you see, we're pretty normal through much of the year until July. We had some rains in August that bumped it up, but it dried right out. And now we've been hanging in the much below normal, lowest 5% range until we started getting those storms in November. So just another piece of the puzzle of why things are low and why we're in a drought. Groundwater level, those are, it's interesting to see. So all of our groundwater levels that I have here, we have transducers in all of our supply wells. So we know what the water levels are in all of our supplies at all times. You pull up on the screen, we have this data. So this is representative of some of the aquifers, the Portsmouth Collins Aquifer, the Greenland Aquifer, and the Madbury Aquifer. I don't have all the wells on here, it'd be way too messy, but if you see, so this is 2023 right here. 21 is probably right in about here. But early 23, our water levels were all very high. This is groundwater elevation, so the higher the water level is in the aquifer. So we started off this year at very high groundwater levels. So the drought has affected us, but compared to historic levels, it's not bad from around average. Things have dropped, as you see there, but compared to historic levels, we are still in good shape. That being said, right now is a very important time for the groundwater to be recharged. Now in the spring, if things freeze up and we only get snow through the winter and the ground's frozen, but that spring, fall, all that snow runs off, it's not going to recharge the ground very well. So that's what we're going to be watching over the winter, and we'll be prepared. If we don't get the recharge like we should get, we'll have to put water use restrictions on early next year. That's the kind of thing that we have to watch. It all depends on the weather. We have a warm winter. Here's just another snapshot of our groundwater levels. This is flipped upside down, so it's depth below the measuring point of each of the wells. This looks at each of the wells. So our Pease wells over here are near average. The orange lines are 2024 data, October 2024 data. The blue lines are the 9-year averages. So it's pretty close with the Pease wells. Portsmouth and Collins wells are actually higher this year than they have been over the past 9 years at this time. our Madbury wells, we've been using them quite a bit, so those water levels are a little bit lower than others. That's the natural system, the precipitation, the stream flow, all that side of things. Now we're looking to the, how much water are we taking out and how much water can we take out to provide. So sort of our source production and our source capacity is how I refer to them. So source production, this is another, just the past year, from November 2023 to October 2024. The orange lines are our 23-24 data, and the blue lines are our 10-year average production. So as you see, for most of the year, our production was below average until the summer months. And then we started getting the less rain, more needs for irrigation, so people started using more water September, October, July. We had a good rain in August, and that cut down some of the demands there, but it's very, very well correlated with irrigation. And our capacity, so this is the other side of it, like how much water can we provide? We have demand on one side, there's how much water people need. This is our capacity. So the bar charts on the left of each of these are current capacity. So that looks at each of our sources. So we know we can pump each source at a certain gallons per minute or gallons per month. And that's not necessarily consistent, specifically with the surface water supply. Summertime, you can't get quite as much water out of the reservoir for a bunch of reasons. One, if the water level is starting to go down, we want to conserve that water. So that kind of goes into that factor of what our real capacity is. And water conditions, water quality conditions at the reservoir may make us, we have to take, be able to take less water from the reservoir. So these charts are intended to say, okay, this is the reality right now with our current capacity on all of our sources. This is how many gallons a minute we can get out each day. And the bar charts on the right are really that production demand. This is how much we've used. Like I showed in the previous chart, actually used. So the intent of these charts is really to show this sort of offset of what really we're able to produce, which is what we need. We have that much residual capacity in our system at this time. So this is important if something such as if we lost one of our sources. How much could we lose here and still manage? You can ask questions when I get through this if you have any. This is just a breakdown of where our water is coming from for the Portsmouth and the Peace systems. 70% from the surface water. This is based on latest quarter data. Somewhere 9 to 10% is typical from the Greenwood well. Peas, we generally try to pull a third from each of the sources.
Do you want to hold questions out till you're done or ask?
I'm almost done. Okay, I can go back.
We'll start.
Perfect. So this is general. So is there water demand or water production over that's 2004. Those dark blue lines are the surface water. The green lines are Portsmouth groundwater sources, and the blue lines on top are the Pease wells. So we see the general trend in our demand for water has gone down over the years. Part of that's due to fixing leaking pipes. Some of it's due to businesses that no longer need as much water as they did or they've gone out of business. But I feel like we, over the past 3-4 years, we've gotten to a more stable control. That's it, guys.
All right, great. My question relates to two of the slides. One was the percent now, the pie chart you had.
Yeah.
And then I think one part of that was the capacity versus, right, they're next to each other. So for, say, Portsmouth water supply, it appears there's a good buffer right now. Maybe we're operating about 75% capacity. Is that pretty much true?
For this, yeah.
So for the the breakout on the next slide. Curious, obviously, there's a 7% from the treatment plant. Now, is the treatment plant like maxed out? Like, let's say we lost 2 wells, could the water treatment plant supply, say, 85% of our water for a period of time?
Yeah, the surface water plant is designed to produce 4 million gallons a day. So in theory, if the surface water quality was excellent and we could run that at max capacity, that would meet our demand. Our demand's closer to 3.
So in theory, if, like you said, Maverick treatment plant's designed for 4, and our demand's about 4. And so, in theory, what Maverick plant could supply all our water for some period of time. But obviously, we don't run it that way. We have about 30% of the water's groundwater.
And it is a seasonal thing too, because, summertime when the water level is dropping, that's when our demand is higher too. So there's a balancing there.
Steve, Rich had a question.
Yeah, I have like I said, looking at the chart, looks like our capacity is pretty stable in terms of, we're not looking at building any more new capacity in the near term. What we have is what we have, with fluctuations and
Like new sources.
yeah. So my question and concern is, in terms of your involvement with planning and so forth, looking at the development that's happening in Portsmouth, like over by where Bed Bath & Beyond is, they're putting 300 and some odd apartments and all these new hotels going in and da. Where does it get to the point where we have to look at whether our water resource infrastructure is capable of meeting the demands of new development? And how are we going to balance that? And when does your organization work with the planning department to say, hey, guys, we reach a critical point when our infrastructure is not going to be able to meet the demand of the development that you're approving?
Right. Oh, great point. Great point. And that's something that we have looked at, I've looked at recently now that I'm able to look at it in that lens. It's good to see that we have this capacity that we have now. Risks come up like, if we did lose a source, if something happened, would we still continue to be able to supply the amount if there's this much growth? Typically that would happen in the summertime when there's a lot of irrigation, and there would be a need for more restriction on the irrigation to be able to meet those demands. We don't want to have to get there, but that's sort of the give and take that could happen in the future. But that being said, there's definitely needs to be this more proactive, like how much can be built with what we have safely. There's the kind of development that's happening now in the water redevelopment. You see over the past years, there has been more development, but it hasn't really shown our demands because those type of developments don't use much water. They don't have the irrigation, which is the big draw. Smaller apartment type developments don't use that much water. But it would be an interesting exercise to go through that process and how much could we, based on an average demand on a building like that, how much could we do?
It's an issue, that issue has actually come up in the legislature, less around water issues and more around housing issues. So one of the issues with approval of some of the bills that would have allowed much higher density in certain areas is the fact that if you allow higher density, you need to pump more water into those areas, you need to have more sewer capacity. And so there are places in Nashua, for example, where they're already strained to the maximum. People would love to build higher density housing in that area. There's a ton of demand for it, but the infrastructure at this point doesn't support it. So you have to have a lot of this stuff coming together. It's one of the reasons why up there, I know a lot of people sort of, tend to look at how we vote on some of the housing bills, and it looks from a distance to be a little schizophrenic sometimes. But one of the things that we do have to consider is the fact that if we create a one-size-fits-all bill in Concord, that one size fits all not only applies to Portsmouth, which may have the capacity to support higher density housing, but it would also apply to a place like Nashua where they don't have the capacity. So those are some of the things that are involved.
And that's it's an interesting process, because if a new development is proposed in an area, you need to look at the infrastructure, and the infrastructure needs to be considered. So you can build this, but you need to upgrade the lines so you can get the water, and it has to kind of go hand in hand.
Thank you. I just want to make sure my impression is correct, that obviously the water use has gone down in the last 20 years in Portsmouth overall. I know it's gonna, the summertime, our population grows, water use is gonna be high. A lot of our residents are turning into second homes, so those people aren't here all winter, they're down in Florida or wherever. But they're not using their water, right? And then everyone comes and uses it all at once. But like, it's often used kind of as a excuse to be against, more development or, the water, can the infrastructure handle it, more traffic? But I just wanted to get your perspective kind of on those spikes, you know what I mean? When it spikes, that's kind of when we'd be worried about, right?
Yeah, that's what you have to kind of plan on. You have to plan on those extremes.
Yeah.
Knowing, and it brings up the question, is it fair to think, okay, in the future, let's make sure everybody has the water, but there's gonna be more restrictions in irrigation, so you can't water your lawn more often. Is that a fair thing to impose on the community?
Right.
Because those type of growths could actually affect others every election.
It just worry, you can't create water. You can't make water, but the earth has the water now, will always have the same amount of water. So we have to think in terms of, okay, that resource isn't gonna expand, but we're putting more and more demands on that resource. So I'm not thinking now, 1 year, 2 years down the road, I'm thinking long-term, that we're gonna have the same amount of water available to Portsmouth 25 years from now, probably, than we have now. And how we need to think that far down. I won't be here to worry about it, but you guys might be here to worry about it, how we're gonna address that.
That's why I think these meetings are super helpful with these graphs, so we can see the trends and it's great. I actually have 2 questions real quick. You talked about possibly having to put in water use restrictions, like would you do that in the winter? Oh, okay, because I was like, what would that look like in the winter? Like, you can only shower twice a week, I don't know.
That's why we didn't put them on last month.
Okay,
If the similar conditions happened, in July, otherwise the restrictions on.
okay, all right, I wanted to just be clear, I was curious about the, and then just if you could speak to the consequences of the drought, obviously water restrictions, but do you see bacteria increases or, is there other consequences a drought will bring that we should be aware of, despite just that we have less water? What other things could be affected when you have a drought in place?
We have not seen any issues with water quality directly from the drought. We've seen an improvement in the reservoir water quality.
Okay.
Which is counterintuitive, but when there's less water in the reservoir, we have a smaller area that we can aerate and manage. And so the water quality that we have is excellent.
Okay.
So we've seen that. And then during the drought of 2016, there was a lot of discussion around the state with bedrock wells, because if the groundwater table drops in the bedrock well, you're exposing new rock areas and water's flowing from different directions, so you end up with more mineralization and things that poor water quality. We don't have bedrock wells, we did not experience that ourselves.
Rich raises a good point about the future, and I don't think it's well known that Seacoast, New Hampshire is not very blessed with a lot of water sources. We don't have any big rivers, or freshwater, I should say. We don't have any big lakes. So Seabrook's on bedrock wells. Hampton is on mostly, I think, bedrock and some gravel. Portsmouth has a few gravel wells, but we were so lucky that the best thing that happened to us with the Pease Air Force Base was they looked around for water. They were going to double the population of Portsmouth. There wasn't any. They had to do something pretty radical, and I don't think it would ever be done today. They went to Madbury and kicked out, 600 acres worth of people to get out, we're gonna dam your land and we need water. It was during the, Cold War and people did the patriotic thing and it's this tremendous resource, the Mad Red Reservoir. I really don't know what we'd do without it. Portsmouth wouldn't be the same for sure, so it's important to remember, correct me if I'm wrong now, but what we have is all we're gonna get, is water resources in Seacoast, once we go desalinization, so we have to watch growth carefully, and Portsmouth's done a great job in reducing our water use. I mean, you can get a lot of water from fixing leaks and being efficient, and I think, that's what this graph shows here, but that can only go so far. We can only get so tight, can only be so efficient, so this is why water resources and planning, they have to be work together closely.
And there's something in management too, and I hate to get to the point of we're eking by with the way to manage water, but part of our integrated management strategy is when is water available at the reservoir, we use it and try to rest our wells, and we can eke more water out on an annual basis by doing that, so.
One of the fears I have is there's tens of thousands of unregulated chemicals in our environment. And when these emerging contaminant lists come out, they come out like every 5 to 10 years, and they only ask for us to test for 5. We are never going to catch up to that backlog of what's circulating out there. So I'm just wondering if there's anything we can do for us just to test for our own knowledge and maybe prepare for all the other PFAS type things that are going to be coming down the pike, because this is going to be going on for years. It feels like Groundhog Day. And none of us want to live through this PFAS stuff again. So is there some way that we can start, even though it's not what the EPA is requiring us to test for emerging contaminants? Could we look around at past industries or what similar countries or regions are finding and say, we should be testing for this now to get ready for it?
The EPA does come out with their contaminant monitoring.
MR, yeah.
Yeah, there's sort of a list of hundreds of chemicals that are on there at least. And I don't know if they published the next for the UCMR, the unregulated contaminant monitoring rule. That's where PFAS was found. That's our latest UCMR 5 was 29 PFAS and lithium that we tested for. I think it's another couple of years before that comes out again. UCMR 6, where we might be able to take a peek and see what they're thinking about, get ahead of it a little bit.
There's also that public health aspect of it. What are we most concerned about? So they might be looking at things that maybe are not the most dangerous. So maybe a little bit of independence from that list seems like it might be a good idea, but I don't even know where to start with that.
I'll say there's been a few opportunities just through my networks through PFAS around the country when different testing technologies have become available. I have worked with Brian and Al to do testing here. And you may recall a couple of years ago, we found the PFPRA, which is a short chain PFAS. So, and then that created a lot of questions like, well, what is this PFAS and can it be filtered and what are the health effects? And so I'm with you, Kim. I agree with just being more proactive, any chance that we can get. And I'll say certainly any new testing opportunities that come my way or different programs I know about, I certainly bring forth to the city and agree that we should do that. I'm not aware of other testing that would go beyond, but I can, keep my ears to the ground. And if I hear of opportunities, I'll certainly raise them with the city. And if you do too, through your channels, if you hear of any contaminants, we should be keeping on the radar. Certainly let us know too.
I just had one question, since with one of the health officers here. With the wildfires, with the forest fires down in Massachusetts caused by the drought, that caused some air quality issues and stuff. Would that cause anything that would affect our water? Or is there anything that would?
They were looking at it.
Yeah.
Somebody has the operator, the systems down there. And I guess the governor even came out to take a look at the reservoirs to see how it was affecting it. At that point, they didn't know.
Yeah. Okay.
Generally, I think forest fires will be a lot more turbidity in the water, of nutrients to the water, which might cause impacts with cyanobacteria in the following years.
Yeah, I'm used to dealing with the forest fires out in Tahoe and stuff, but, you know, growing up here, it's never been an issue, you know, or I don't recall it ever, you know, and then this year being like, whoa, it's different, so. It's a risk.
Move on.
Discussion.
Projects update, and I'm not gonna go through detail on all these projects that the projects that we are working on, I'll breeze through them, but I'm open to, if any of them that you wanna know more about, feel free to ask. Lafayette Tank, storage and pressure study, this is a, study to see if there was anything that we could immediately do to improve some of the pressures in the southern Lafayette Road area, as well as questions about what we needed to do for the Lafayette storage tank to improve quality from that. That study is nearly complete. I just sent the report to the state. We had a $50,000 grant, planning grant from the state, so they're part of the review process for that. We've already implemented one of the recommendations, which was to install a mixer in the Lafayette tank. The tank is it's a 7.5 million gallon tank, a very large tank. So over the summer, the chlorine residual in that tank decreases, and that's not a good thing. We want to make sure we have enough residual in that tank. So by adding a mixer to that tank, we're able to keep the residual in that. So that was a good outcome. There are some more follow-ups from that study that we will be doing, as well as we are getting amendment to that study to take a look at the Spinney Road tank and the Newington booster tank to help us prioritize all the work that needs to be done in those tanks. They all need to be repaired in some places and resurfaced, and we need to get a timeline of when all that work will be done. Greenland Well PFAS treatment design, that as well has gone through, it's nearly complete with the preliminary design phase. There was some geotech soil borings done just earlier this week, and some more surveying that needs to be done before we can take that next step of going into a final design process. Likely will be 8 to 12 months in that process of design. So that'll get us to 2025. So 2026, we hope to break ground and start building that treatment plant. And it's one of those eye-opening things where back when we started looking at this, it was a $2.5 million project. The engineers are now saying it's closer to a $7 million project. Costs for PFAS treatment are going through the roof right now since there's such a demand. That was based on a new plant. This went up in May. Portsmouth Collins Wells, PFAS treatment plant, same thing. It's going to be a bigger treatment plant. For those, we got preliminary report is in draft still. We're reviewing that and filing costs to send on to the Air Force for their consideration in our next ESCA with them to be able to get funding to design and build that treatment plant. Hydraulic model update. Hydraulic model we use for all kinds of things. When a new development comes into town, we run the model to see how it's going to affect our system hydraulically, based on their demands, their fire flow demands, how it will affect their system. So that model, we've been working on it for many years. It needed a bigger upgrade, which we just did. There will be continuous work on that well. Little Bay transmission main, that project, we've taken some funds that were assigned to that project and put them towards more immediate needs. The Little Bay Road water main replacement, Walnut Street water main replacement, and the air release valve and transmission main clearing projects. We've taken some money from that transmission main project and put it to those three. Because the transmission main project is ready to move towards the next step, we put the valves in, and we were feeling comfortable with those valves. If something did go wrong with one of those pipes, we'd be able to isolate it and repair it. That's not to say we're not going to do that project. We're still going to put another main under the bay, but we need to go through permitting. We need to revisit all the design work for that. So that's taking time. So that's where those stand right now. Little Bay Road, that project is going to go, there's about a mile of water main that has been breaking routinely, and it needs to be repaired immediately. So that project's going to go out to bid next week or the week after next for construction as early as we can get out there in March to do that work. And Bond Street is another similar old poor quality pipe that's had multiple breaks. That's only 1,000 feet of pipe needs to change there. More projects. Smith well maintenance, this is just routine maintenance on that well. We do this routinely. We'll probably include the Harrison well also as part of routine maintenance. Collins Well 2 permitting is still ongoing. There was a study done for potential habitat ecological impact of the pond that's out there when the new Collins Well operates. So there's a study done for that. So that's with the state in their review right now. So it's just an ongoing project. So we're not in any hurry to connect the Collins Well to at this time, because that will be part of the upgrade when we put the new treatment system on for a portion of the Collins Wells. Service line inventory and service line replacement. Mason's going to talk all about that. That's been taking a lot of our time, inordinate amount of time. Seacoast reliability projects is a study that Underwood is doing, the state-funded project to look at interconnections between different communities. I believe we'll be seeing a final draft early next year for that. Talking about interconnections with Dover and Durham and testing our interconnection with Rye. Portsmouth Dover, yeah, that's the interconnection studies. LB Dam intake modifications, that's a project to come to help us manage the cyanobacteria and our water quality in summertime. Water system energy audit, we're still in the process of looking at that. You know, anywhere we can improve the efficiency of a pump or system, we will do that. And the master plan update, unfortunately, the master plan update, that was on Brian's desk and now it's on my desk. And part of the CIP is basically all this stuff. I mean, ends up in the master plan. It's just a matter of writing it down and putting it together of when things need to happen. What's the priority? I hope to get that, working on that by spring. This is just a hit list of our treatment design of the Greenland Well. If you ever seen the Greenland Well, that was new Greenland Well building installed in 2018 timeframe. One of my first projects when I came here as the green roof was our attempt to minimize our stormwater impacts in that area. The new building will go in front of that to house the granular activated carbon filters. Yeah, Portsmouth Collins, you know, the things that we know about that is it's also going to be granular activated carbon there because the fairly low concentrations of PFAS, so we don't need to go with the ion exchange media. And both the Collins Well and the Portsmouth Well are going to be piped to us, the same facility to reduce cost. That's it for me. Any questions about the projects? Yeah.
I know in the RAB discussions, we talked about originally the treatment for PFAS from the water supply would get destroyed and if it were incinerated, and then that didn't seem to be really a completely 100% possible outcome, and so it was just being landfilled. Is there an update on what's happening to the spent PFAS or the recovered PFAS?
Going to a Class C hazardous waste landfill.
It's going to a hazardous waste landfill.
That's where the residents go, yeah. The granular activated carbon is reactivated, so we're in a rotation with Calgon, they take it back, they reactivate it, and we keep our same carbon. We're not getting anybody else's carbon. We get our carbon back, they reactivate it, send it back. When we get it back, we do the tests to make sure that it doesn't have PFAS or arsenic or any other chemicals in it. So
And there's no technical advancements to be able to actually destroy PFAS that you're hearing about?
there's a lot.
Yeah, so at the RAB next week, we're actually having a presentation from the Air Force on PFAS destruction. So this is good timing. Yep, there has been a lot of technology developing. It's just the devil is in the details, right? Are you truly destroying all the PFAS? So we're gonna hear about some of that next week, actually.
The resulting byproduct of that is in terms of, if,
Correct.
you know, we don't know what the health effects of those guys are after you do that to the PFAS, what's left and what did that mean?
And just a final question, when we're talking about water conservation, I don't know what the local building codes are. It's not my arena, but I know that the Portsmouth adopts like national codes a lot, and then we sometimes put our own spin on it. Could there be suggestion, maybe in the master plan, if that's the place for it, or in discussions with the building department, that if there is new development and we are concerned about water supply for the future, can new development be required to have water conservation utilities only, like water conservation toilets and water conservation showers? And so I know we can't change everything out we have now, but if maybe in developments, that could be a requirement for future protection of the supply.
Yeah, that's a good idea to look into that. I know a lot of the things that are sold now, low floor toilets, and all you can't get a high floor toilet anymore.
Well, and so maybe that's the answer. Maybe it's already been done.
Yeah, but we have I'm sorry, we have a very old infrastructure in Portsmouth. There's a lot.
We have the rebate program still, that's still a thing. If you wanna get your toilet or washing machine, you can get your rebates on it.
Would hearing about the reliability project next year be a possible talk?
Yeah, that's a great idea.
I mean, I think that would be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep, it's a good idea.
To follow up on Kim's comment, you mentioned that irrigation is the most wasteful, if you will, use of water. Maybe with new development, instead of putting grass and other kinds of stuff in, maybe requiring them to put some kind of other kinds of landscaping that doesn't require constant watering and all the other kinds of stuff that might be needed to, or, other kinds of creative landscaping.
Yeah, and along those same lines for new developments, is if there's gonna be an irrigation system put in, we require an irrigation meter, a separate meter for irrigation. So in times when we need to make sure that people don't irrigate, we'll be able to see if they're irrigating or not. To check and balance on that, control for irrigation stuff.
Semi-permeable surfaces, where parking areas and stuff can be made, constructed with materials that allow more permeation of rainwater through into the ground rather than.
Yeah, and it's in standards, and I don't know if this is the case in Portsmouth of depth of loam, things are built and you only put 2 inches of loam, just enough to grow the grass for the first few days, but you have to keep watering it so much to get that to grow, that's the problem.
All right, take it, just like transition. You can tell me. It's funny, I was talking to my wife before driving over here, and we were talking about how you start off at a really young age, and your teacher gives you an assignment to present for 5 minutes, and it's a drag, it's grueling for 5 minutes, and then you get to be older, and they say give this presentation for 15, and you're like, damn, I wish I had like an hour. I'll try to keep it short and sweet, but this has been, a huge effort, not just on my behalf, but Al, Mariah, people downtown working for the water meter crew. They've done a lot of heavy lifting on inspections of service line materials. A lot of hands in the pot on this whole effort. I'm sure you guys have heard about it across other water systems, not just in the state, but the country. So yeah, I'm going to talk about the service line inventory. Just start with a timeline update on that. The customer notifications following the inventory submission, the free lead testing that's being offered by us but funded by DES, and then kind of transition into the lead and copper rule improvement regulatory side of things and what our results are with that. So yeah, first date should be October 16th. It's burned into my brain, but somehow the 7th slipped in. We submitted the service line inventory on the 16th of October, which not only included all domestic water service lines, but fire and irrigation as well. Which then immediately after submittal, we had to send these notification letters to all of our customers that had unknown materials for their service lines and galvanized. We know that we don't have any lead components or service lines throughout our system so far, but in total, out of all of our unknowns and galvanized lines, it was a total of 3,100 letters with my name and number plastered all over. So the next step, and this is still ongoing, just a very heavy influx of calls and emails following these letters. It was a heavy duty amount of information and people were very concerned just seeing the word lead plastered everywhere, reasonably so. And with those letters, you know, we were prompting the free lead testing, which a lot of people wanted to do. So 137 kits have been distributed so far with Mariah's help with that. And we have about 20 more that we're currently compiling and we'll send out by next week. We're in the works of trying to receive state funding for additional efforts with this inventory process, with handling all of these unknowns, but also service line replacements for the galvanized service line owners. And, you know, the status, just briefly, we'll dive into these a little bit more throughout the presentation. We have 594 private side service lines left to identify, which is really good because we have 8,400 connections throughout both the Portsmouth and Pease Tradeport systems combined. And out of those identified, 87% of those lines are copper, which is great. We have more work to do on the city side inspections, simply because we didn't have the luxury of digitizing records very early on. It wasn't until the early 90s that we started doing that. So a lot of our records of line materials are, you know, hand drawn on tie cards and as-built. And we're trying to do, you know, trying to tackle that side of just digitizing all those records. But also we have yet to find, you know, the smoking gun statement within an ordinance that, you know, galvanized was no longer installed after this point in time. So that's the explanation there. So following the inventory submission, we had 30 days to push out all of these letters and just based on the EPA and DES regulations. And so we decided to take their guidance documents and split it up into 3 different letters that we were going to send out to people. The first one being to those with galvanized steel lines. We knew of about 135 of these lines at the time, which included, you know, the action to replace the line. The second letter was unknowns on the city-owned portion, and you can see the numbers of how many letters were distributed just based on each one. And then another letter for those with privately owned portions that had yet to be identified, which was 592 at the time. Now with that, it suggests, and we hope that people give me a call so that we can schedule a time for a water meter crew member to go out and inspect that portion of the line. It's much easier to inspect private side services, just because it's a matter of just going into your basement where the water meter is located, seeing that line and just doing a scratch test on it to see what type of material that is.
Ask questions, or do we wait till the end?
You can ask that. That's fine.
So galvanized is a concern for lead?
Yes, so that there are water quality concerns that come with that. If there was ever a lead component upstream or downstream of that galvanized line, lead can bind to galvanize, absorb to it, and, you know, gradually leach out into the drinking water over time. Now, it wasn't common practice for our system to install lead. If it was like way back in the day, it would be like a connector, like a lead gooseneck, if you've heard of those. But we've had yet to find those in decades.
It's interesting too, the way the EPA rule is written, it doesn't even include those lead connectors. This is like state and us being diligent with that. If it's less than 2 feet, it's not really considered lead pipe with the EPA rule. But the fact that there's a little bit of lead and it could bleach is why it's still considered that whole galvanized line as being a risk.
And unknown material on city-owned portion, no further action. Why is that?
Because it's up to us to pothole, to visually inspect. Yeah, this is just referring to the letters people receive. There's really nothing that they can do about it at that time. There's no way for us to, push forward with scheduling efforts when it comes to that effort in general, because, you need a back truck to do it. If you saw on the initial slide, there's a picture of a back truck, and it's very invasive. Takes a lot of time. So yeah, just a little bit more about the letters. Just people were very concerned when they first received these letters. I think people weren't reading it all the way through to begin with, but some of the information that was included in there, and I can pass these around just to show exactly what the letters look like. All three of them are there. But health effects of lead, what you can do to reduce the exposure of lead, testing your water, and different opportunities. The one opportunity with that, identifying your service line material, which is prompted for private side inspections, or just, like I said, the notice of future potholing efforts and why you should replace galvanized service lines and next steps to do so. All that information, very concerning. But what isn't included in the letters, and that they weren't seeing up front, is that, we have yet to identify a lead component or service line throughout both systems. We've identified over 7,700 privately owned services, and, out of the 8,400 connections, 87% are copper. The others are either HDPE, high density plastic, or ductile iron, or the galvanized. There are existing records that have not yet been digitized. I already spoke to this a little bit, and these had to be listed as unknowns. If one portion of the line was unknown, then the whole thing was unknown in the inventory. Our annual monitoring of lead has indicated the 90th percentile concentration of lead in our system is 1 part per billion or less, which is very small. And this is based on our annual monitoring through the lead and copper rule that we carry out, sometimes semi-annual, which we'll dive into those results for this year. Sources of lead can be linked to a property's internal plumbing and fixtures, not just the service line. I think there's a lot of confusion with that at times. People call me and say, what are you saying? I have lead in my drinking water, and it's coming from you? No, not quite. Very old homes and infrastructure, as someone mentioned here. If you have really old fixtures in your homes, they were made with lead alloys. You could have lead solder connecting copper lines within your home as well. It's hard to pinpoint where the source is when you're testing, because you're just taking a grab sample. So that's something to consider when talking about this. Next slide. Oh, actually, we'll go back real quick. I just wanted to show the dashboard that we have posted on the city website. You can look up your own address if you live in Portsmouth and see, whether or not your service line has been identified on one side or the other. They're gonna.
I think they can get it from their phones too.
Yep, you can scan the QR. I was hoping to pull it up here, but
It's fine.
I'd have to share it, also try to share it.
might have to zoom in a little bit.
Okay.
Now you have to look at it. Oh, there, almost there.
Got it.
Thanks.
It's not working.
It's working.
Oh,
Yep, it's working.
Yeah.
It's
Okay,
working on the
okay.
front for them.
I got it.
Al's frozen over there.
Yeah.
Just have to zoom in on it.
Yeah, so it's a little difficult on your phone. It's better on a desktop computer, but it's an interactive map where you can go in the upper right-hand portion of the map where the search icon is. Type in your address, and it'll go straight to the point of your address where you can click on that dot and see what the private side portion is identified as or the city side.
Online registry.
Okay, we could. There you go. Anyone daring enough to provide their address for us?
Sure.
Yeah.
75 Aldrich.
Okay. You gotta get up to the top right, scroll up. Yep, you got it.
Can you search by a specific address? You just have to find it on the map. Or can you type
You
it
can
in?
do both.
Okay.
Yeah, either way, yep. So it's, you wanna type in 75 Aldrich? No, it's CH, Aldrich.
ICH.
Yep. Okay, so you can hit the zoom to in the top left there, right above your search result
Other
on the left-hand side of the map. Yep, zoom to.
Because it's like,
It's a little difficult.
Oh, there you go.
There you go. So it brings you right to the address. You can click on it, and in the upper left-hand corner, the system-owned portion is non-lead, and the customer-owned portion is non-lead copper, specifically copper. So you're all set. That's
Yeah, thanks. Except for that one fixture I had.
except for your third floor bathroom. So yeah, we can go back to the slides, but I just thought I'd point that out because it is very helpful for people to understand, you know, right down to where they're living and, you know, alleviate a little bit more concern.
Are you seeing clusters in certain neighborhoods? So does that matter?
No, not quite. I think, like I said, the majority of our unknowns are on the city side right now, and that's difficult to kind of explain to people that it's a combination of different factors as to why that is. Now it's because of how much work we've done out in the distribution system with replacing water mains. If we were to ever come across a galvanized portion on our side, it's immediately replaced. And so typically what you have is that private side portions are left the way they are because we are notifying the customer and the homeowner at that point in time that we highly suggest that you replace your portion now. But if they don't have the money to do it, if they don't take us seriously, then they just say, I'm going to leave it the way it is. Well, so all of these galvanized services that we found are on the private side. And we know that our side is not the case with those galvanized services.
When you just look at the map, without clicking on individual addresses, there were different colored dots. Is that green is non-lead and red
Green
is
is
lead?
completely identified, purple is unknown, and red squares are galvanized. Yep. And that's indicated in there too. There's some stats below at the bottom of the map. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, so just to break this down a little further, just in terms of statistics, I kind of already highlighted some of this information, but out of all of the privately owned portions of service lines, again, 80% of the total, not just those identified, it comes up with 80% of the whole system. We have HDPE at 6%. Galvanized makes up less than 2%, which is a really good sign. We've done a lot of work to replace those if they were existing in the past, but I think it just wasn't common practice as much as some other systems throughout the country. We have 7% left to identify for privately owned portions. And yes, I just wanted to speak to the comparison with other systems. I don't know if you know that Chicago has 400,000 known lead lines. And with this whole regulatory shift, they have to replace every single lead or galvanized line in 10 years' time. We are lucky in the sense that we haven't found any lead in our system. And it is a small portion of galvanized where we're just highly suggesting to people that, you take care of this now. It's reaching the end of its lifespan. It can break at any moment too. It's fine. So then to speak to the free lead testing efforts a little bit more, this is, it's interesting because every water system throughout the state had to include this in their letters, and DES had a large amount of money allocated toward this testing, which I think is great for the community. And a lot of people in response to these letters have wanted to participate in that. On our end, we have to do all of the heavy lifting on the front of compiling these kits, including, a sample bottle, sample instructions, a collection form people have to fill out, and dropping off these kits on everyone's doorstep for them to carry out the process, call us back. We have to pick it up and drop it off to a lab for testing. So there's a little bit more to it. When you just say free lead testing is available, it's very, easy to say that without looking deeper. So 137 have been distributed. We have about 20 more that we have to do. Calls keep rolling in. But we also have the program that we started through the Safe Water Advisory Group, where 65 kits have been distributed, 33 people have tested. And then we also have the lead and copper rule annual monitoring. That's a compliance sampling program. And so data is being collected from every which way, and I'll speak to, some of that data at a later slide. Next steps for the lead and copper rule improvements. We have to revamp our whole sample site pool by the end of January of next year, which is strictly based on the inventory that we submitted. So every galvanized line, known galvanized service line, needs to be included in the sample pool. That's just a requirement based off this new tiered structure to the regulation. We're currently working through the plan of potholing specific areas of our system, tackling neighborhoods at a time that have yet to be identified. We're providing pitcher filters to homeowners following galvanized replacements, because with this disturbance of replacing a line like that, there is the potential of lead, if it is bound to the galvanized, to slough off and make its way to the water.
Remind me of what potholing means?
Yeah. So it's taking a vac truck, which basically just creates a suction around the shutoff valve out in front of a property to dig down into the earth and just see both sides of the service line. So I didn't really explain the split ownership, but I assume most people know how that works, with the shutoff valve being the line between what's yours and what's ours. So that's really the only way for us to visually inspect our side. And that's the only way that we can properly identify what's on our side if we don't have an existing record. Sorry. No, you're good. So then lowering of the lead action limit from 15 to 10 parts per billion starting in 2027. And we must verify 100% of the unknown service line materials by 2037. Same with replacements as well. So just to, speak to our corrosion control treatment practices and just the data that we collect with the compliance monitoring year after year. This is the most recent set of results. For Q3 of this year, we collected 30 samples throughout the Portsmouth water system. These are at mostly residential properties. And there were 29 that had non-detect levels of lead within the sample, and only one of them had a detection of 6.6 parts per billion. 12 of those participants out of the 30 had galvanized lines. Only one of those galvanized lines had the detection of 6.6 parts per billion. For the Pease Tradeport system, we do Pease and Newcastle as well in a similar fashion. There were 22 samples collected, 21 of them had non-detect levels of lead, and one of them had a detection of 2.6 parts per billion. And this is kind of a continuation of that data as well, but this is more historic. So we didn't put corrosion control treatment online until, Al, do you remember what year?
2002, 2004, see higher levels and then.
Yeah, so you can kind of see back in 2003, we did have more elevated levels. And this also speaks to the internal plumbing that I was referring to as well. It doesn't necessarily mean that because those concentrations were so high, that at that point in time, we had more lead in our system. It could have been strictly because more of that lead was sloughing off from the internal plumbing and fixtures of these older homes. But when we put corrosion control practices online, what we do is we add polyorthophosphate, which coats the inside of all the pipes throughout the system, including your home, and prevents that corrosion from happening, that leaching. So from then on, we've had very, very low levels of lead. The 90th percentile is 90% of the sample pool being at or below that concentration. So 1 part per billion in the past 5-6 years. And that's it. Any questions?
What to it?
Yeah,
It's hard to stay on track.
I have a few questions. So thank you very much. That's super helpful. The filters that you're gonna give, or that you could give to people once they change out the galvanized lines, how long would someone need to filter their water after it was changed out?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Through the regulation, we have to provide pitcher filters for at least 6 months following that. Yeah, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have this potential of lead leaching into your water. That disturbance is pretty quick and you can flush it out, over time. And that's something that's recommended. When you change out your service line, definitely flush your water with cold water only for a good period of time.
What's a good period of time?
Yeah, it varies. I mean, depending on your property, how large of a property it is, how many fixtures and things you have within your home. I'd say about 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Yeah.
With everything wide open, basically.
Yeah, so we are offering sampling with that too. So if we expect a galvanized line to be changed out, we hand them a letter notifying them of all these potentials, what they can do to minimize those risks, but also offering lead testing at that point in time.
What about changing your water meter? So I know the city does that. Do you need to flush anything out? Or should you? No, that's not as in.
Yeah, I guess with galvanized lines, they're hesitant to change them out to begin with because they're very old. They reach the end of their lifespan pretty much. And it's kind of a liability factor on our end too, to go and change out this meter every 10 years and it just breaking when they go to change it out. So, yeah.
What is the cost to change a line?
Like I know you were saying that there may be funds through 2025. So if someone had to pay for that themselves, what could they expect it would cost?
Yeah, that varies based on how invasive it's gonna be, how long the line is. Typically, I've heard between, 6,000, sometimes 4 for shorter lines to like 10 plus.
Yeah, and the state for the funding part of it, they were
7.
suggested 10,000.
Oh, okay.
For any purposes, 10,000 per month. I've heard it's closer to 5.
Okay. And I don't know if you know the answer, but is that something like your homeowner's insurance would maybe cover?
I don't know the answer.
Yeah, they don't usually. Yeah, it's like,
You don't usually cover water or sewer.
yeah, okay. And then I think my last question is just, so say you hear from folks that have galvanized lines, they get your letter, they test, they find lead in their water. Or all these people that are getting their water tested for lead and you find it. When you send them their results, obviously you address what they can do to address the water, right? Whether that's replace the line or filter your water. Is there additional resources given to people to say, do you have children between these ages? Maybe you could get their blood tested. Like, does it go, and I understand this is the water department, but are there additional resources beyond just the water for people if they do detect lead?
Yes.
What they can do?
So included in these sample kits is more information, kind of highlighting what your result might mean.
Okay,
You do have a detection past a certain point.
Okay.
We don't include the blood testing opportunity, but it wouldn't prevent me from telling people that if they were to call and ask about it, in a more in-depth discussion with that.
And we can refer them to the health department.
And we could, kick them over to Kim, yeah. So yes, there's a lot of information, and same with our city website updates as well. We've included a ton of information just about this whole inventory process, but also health effects of lead if, it is found in a sample.
Well, and on that fact sheet from the EPA, there's a number that you can call with the EPA to get
That's
more
good.
information of what you can do if there's lead in your water.
Yeah.
So that could be helpful too.
Have you had anybody who's interested in learning more, but then when they hear about it, they're worried about what it could mean for the resale of their house or anything like that?
A couple, yes. I had a call at one point where this woman didn't want to change out her galvanized line because she was just gonna sell the place and leave it for the next person type thing. And, it was just a simple fact that, I mean, she's taking a risk, and that's what we tell people is that at any day, at any moment, it could break. And the cost of replacing your line when it breaks and it's flooding your home is far more substantial than if you were to do it now. So that's what I've been pushing. And same with the water quality. I don't think a lot of people know about that when they find out they have a galvanized line. The potential's there, but like I said, with some of this data, it's kind of surprising that, not surprising, but it's interesting to see that a lot of these galvanized lines do not have detections of lead in their sample. And again, there's so many different sources when you talk about that, where it's not just the service line, it can be the internal plumbing and fixtures.
Can I ask a follow-up to that? So let's say this hypothetical person is notified they have a galvanized line, they don't want to change it, they sell the home. When a home is purchased, doesn't the city come out and do something with the meter, or I don't know, isn't there something red, or I'm trying to remember when I bought my house, but is there a way that, let's say a property has a galvanized line, the current homeowner is notified, but then the city must know when the properties change hand?
Yes.
Would that trigger you to send a letter to the new homeowner? Who may then take that more seriously, or?
Yeah, that's a good question. So with all of these letters, we have to send these out every year.
Okay,
So it will get to them.
eventually, if
Yeah.
transactions change hand or whatnot, okay.
If it stays galvanized, then it,
The meter crews, and the meter gets pulled, the meter gets put in,
Yeah.
we know that too, so.
Mhm.
You
Okay,
know it though, before you sell the house, more.
Yeah, you're liable.
absolutely,
You're
right.
liable.
But if
Otherwise,
someone
you
didn't,
Get sued for a fraudulent transfer.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Listen, I know you probably have to do a lot of salesmanship to convince people this is a good idea. And I know copper, plastic, lead, usually don't have to worry about capacity issues, but if you get a galvanized person, often, galvanized pipe this big has a diameter that's this big.
Mhm.
And be surprised, probably know the capacity that you'll return if you replace the galvanized line that's been so rusted internally that it's only a pencil width diameter now versus what it was when it was built. So I don't know if that's a discussion you have with folks with galvanized lines, is that if you replace them, you're gonna find the capacity in your house jump tremendously.
I haven't heard people complain about pressure in their homes when they are talking about their galvanized lines, and I've talked to,
But they're probably just so used to it.
yeah, maybe.
Right, we're also, I mean, is it true that a galvanized line in the city right now is 100 years old, and most all of them
Absolutely.
have like a pencil thickness of supply right now?
Yeah, it's
So it's just a thought, if you say, hey, you know what's gonna happen when you get a new line? You're gonna have clean water, plus you're gonna get like a fire hose for a shower.
That's a good point. Yeah, we are notifying people of the potential for us to receive funding as well, which maybe we shouldn't do because, it really just pushes people off to the side to wait. And it's just not a guarantee for us. So I'm making that clear to people as well.
When people are replacing their lines, and some people are choosing the plastic products, the HDPE. Is there any, scientifically proven supportive evidence that there are some more inert substances than others? So 50 years from now or 25 years from now, we're now not replacing all the plastic lines, that we're replace the lead lines, that sort of.
Yeah, I think those HDPE lines that are installed are standardized in a way based off of a different regulation that I'm not super familiar with, but I know there's standards relating to that. It's also, I think you brought this up the last time that you came to one of these swag meetings. It's more of like an emerging contaminant. I don't think there's a lot of research out there to confidently say that you're consuming microplastics with a service line. So it's not common to have, I think, like I said, there were 500 known HDPE lines. And that's kind of I've noticed private developments and private parts of the systems will go that route.
Last 5 feet, it's standard practice for private wells too.
Yeah.
And so that's
Yeah,
one place where education would come in, because as a city, you can't tell people what they can use if it's approved. But
We push for
as a
cover.
group, you can educate people that maybe there's better choices.
Yeah. Yeah, there's more diving into with that, absolutely.
All right, we'll move on to, we're getting close to the end. I think we have a couple more items left. I just wanted to update everybody on a DOD policy that is going to affect the city of Portsmouth. Before I dive into that, I just want to remind everybody that the EPA did finalize MCL's maximum contaminant levels, which are drinking water standards that are enforceable for PFAS, about 6 of them in April of 2024, so earlier this year. And for the EPA, public water systems have 5 years to implement implement treatment to comply with these standards, which really isn't that much time, frankly. And we have 2 wells that are in the city water system. The Portsmouth and Collins well, they're in the southern well field, which is close to Pease or near Pease. And so those wells have been monitored since the discovery of PFAS at Pease, so over 10 years. And those wells do exceed the EPA MCLs. And so I know on the RAB, we talked about the Restoration Advisory Board, the community has raised questions to the Air Force about when are you going to implement treatment on these 2 city wells. And in August, they had told us, the Air Force had told us they didn't have a policy or guidance. But in September, the DOD did issue a policy, which is on the right-hand side. That's the front page of it, and the link is at the bottom if you're interested in reading it. and it's basically how they're gonna prioritize implementing PFAS standards in private wells and public water systems. And the big takeaways from the policy are essentially they're gonna start with any wells that are 3 times above these MCLs that are listed here. They're gonna start with the worst first. And the Portsmouth and the Collins well would be below the 3 times. So we don't have a clear understanding as to when the Air Force is gonna implement treatment, but we do know that the city is required to meet the standard by 2029. And so if you want to go to the next slide, please, Al. There was a community engagement session that DOT hosted. About 80 community members from all across the country sent a letter to the Pentagon asking for more clarity and more information on this policy. And they did agree to host that community engagement session. That was a couple weeks ago. It was recorded. The link at the bottom of the slide, you can see the slides that they gave and the presentation that they gave. They did try to give some more clarity in terms of, they are starting with the worst first, but they weren't very clear as to the timelines. Like, okay, if you start with the worst first, when do you get to the rest? And so we don't have a whole lot of answers, but I think the biggest update I wanted to give you was that we do now have a policy. We do have DOD saying they will address it. They're going to start with the worst first, and we don't quite know where the timeline is for our 2 wells. And yeah, we have a RAB meeting next week, and my understanding is the Air Force may have some more details for this. This information session was nationwide. Over 500 people joined from all over the country. So I hope at our RAB meeting next week, the Air Force might give us some more clarity about what we can expect here at Portsmouth. And there's also private wells around Newington that are also going to be affected by this policy. And we hope to see them implement some treatment on the private wells as well. So to be continued, we'll keep you posted, but I just wanted to make sure you knew about the policy and the community engagement session. Yes.
I don't want to get political, but
You're going to.
big summit here. One of the items in Project 2025 was to address the issue of overregulation of PFAS. And so some of these things, I don't know what's going to happen, but we need to pay attention to what might happen in terms of changing some of the regulations. They're not laws, they're regulations that can be adjusted much more easily at EPA level. So something to pay attention to.
My understanding is these MCLs have been promulgated, and I'm hearing it would be difficult for those to be rolled back, but not impossible. So I agree that we need to watch it closely, but I'm grateful that the EPA got this finalized this year and put into law. And yeah, we don't know what the future holds, but all we can do is just these are the updates right now. And hopefully we get more clarity next week. Thank you very much. And I think the biggest takeaway for this group is that we have 2 wells in our City of Portsmouth system where the Air Force is responsible for the PFAS contamination. And it's critically important that we keep putting the pressure on them to pay for the treatment. That shouldn't fall on us as taxpayers. And so far, the Air Force has taken responsibility in the P systems, and they have taken ownership and financial responsibility of paying for that. And we just want to make sure that they continue to do that on the city side as well. Even though our levels are low, they're not the 3 times. The law is the law, and the city has to follow the law. And so if our wells exceed what the EPA is saying is safe, we should get treatment on those wells as soon as possible and get them paid for by the Air Force. And so I will continue to put the pressure on them, as well as, I know Al meets with the Air Force, but that's what's important, the important message to take away tonight.
And this treatment systems take time. So we figure for the Portsmouth Collins well, it'll be about 3 years to go through, a year to go through the design, 2 years of construction before we get online. That, if it goes well, will be 2028. If there's any kind of pushback, that'll get us into the regulated 2029 period. So who's going to be responsible for going out of compliance if the Air Force does not step up?
Right.
So
all questions we need to just keep asking. And
I just included this in here to give everybody perspective on the levels that we're seeing now. From the Portsmouth well is the highest, PFOA 7.5, PFOS 5. So a little bit above the 4 limit, but that's our worst well. Collins 4.2 for PFOS, Greenland well 4.6 for PFOA. And this is the running 12-month average. see where that's at.
All right, I'll pass it over to David.
Okay, well, so we completed the 2024 legislative year in June. And the governor finally got around to deciding which bills he was going to sign and not going to sign by the end of October. I guess the good news is about 40% of the bills that were put forward last year were actually passed by the House and Senate and signed into law. And there were some, I think, some fairly significant ones. Kind of along the lines of what we were talking about with lead testing. There's now a requirement that requires people selling property that there's known PFAS groundwater contamination to notify potential buyers of that contamination. So that's something we've been fighting for. I actually had a bill in a couple of years ago that would have done something like that. So this has been something we've been trying to do for a few years. That's finally gotten passed. Another one is really much broader recognition of the cyanobacteria problem with the lakes. I think when it actually started affecting Lake Winnipesaukee this year, it was a real wake-up call for a lot of people in New Hampshire. So there was a bill that actually puts control of the cyanobacteria that was under the control of the New Hampshire Clean Lakes program. A bill that I actually had it was sort of prompted by the fact that we got a PFAS settlement from, not PFAS, but a PCB settlement from Monsanto a couple of years ago for $25 million. None of that money was actually ever spent on PCB remediation because the legislature never designated that it should be used for that purpose. So for settlement money to actually be used to remediate contamination, the legislature actually has to approve doing that. And for one reason or another, nobody ever thought to put PCBs in that list of, of things. So what happened is the governor in a budget year decided to take the $20 million, $5 million went to the lawyers, and move it over to the general fund where it can literally be spent on anything. So it kind of helped him out in the budget situation. But anybody who had an issue with PCBs, and we still have places in New Hampshire that have issues with PCBs, some money, DES told me that some of that money actually, there is some money being spent on monitoring PCBs and things like that, but nowhere near $20 million. So what I did was I created a bill that created what amounts to a holding fund for any environmental settlement that we get that hasn't been designated by the legislature. It'll go into a special fund, and essentially it'll sit there for a couple of years. And if the legislature decides to do something with it, great, that's what will happen to it. If the legislature can't make up its mind, then it becomes up to the Commissioner of Environmental Services to decide where he or she wants to deploy that money. So the money would be able to go, let's say, to the Drinking and Groundwater Trust Fund for PFAS remediation or other types of contamination. But the bottom line is going forward, any money that we receive for environmental settlements will actually get spent on environmental remediation, monitoring, education, things like that, and not get spent on copier, paper and toner and gas for the lawnmowers at the State House and stuff like that. So that was something that I was personally glad to see get through. Another one that got through is a bill that prohibits some products with intentionally added PFAS. This is sort of the start of what's probably going to be a very long fight at the local level and the national level. And a lot of this doesn't really take effect until 2030. When these products can actually be banned from the consumer stream. But it's the bottom line is we have ongoing issues with PFAS and landfills, and we keep manufacturing products with PFAS and putting them in landfills. And so the problem, even though we know about it, just keeps getting worse. Keeps getting worse and worse. me see, another one, and this is something I know that people have been fighting for years. There's now a requirement for insurance companies that insurance coverage be provided for blood testing in a way that's not subject to a copayment or deductible. So essentially making it work almost like preventive care. And this is something that hopefully will get a lot more people to take advantage of that kind of testing. Some of the things that didn't make it, there was a much broader proposed ban on packaging, food packaging that had PFAS, has PFAS in it that did not make it. There was a pretty good bill around providing health insurance coverage for people who who know they've been exposed to PFAS, so more preventative coverage, so they essentially exams and visits to their doctor and blood tests and things like that would be paid for more on an ongoing basis, as opposed to diagnostic care, which triggers deductibles and co-payments and all of that stuff. That did not make it. There was a lot of controversy around landfill siting. A lot of us probably heard about the issues with Casella and the proposed landfill up in Dalton that people have opposed. A lot of back and forth in the legislature, and I think some good work, took place. And this is, in a lot of ways, it's almost like PFAS. There are a lot of areas where we fight like cats and dogs. But increasingly, there are some areas where I think people are coming together, and one of them is on landfills. Nobody really likes them. Nobody wants them in their town. And if they're going to be in their town, they want to make sure that they're not leaking stuff into the local water supply, and and things like that are taken care of. So I think there's a much broader understanding. There's a lot of education that takes place, and so the value of putting some of these bills through year after year in Concord is the fact that eventually stuff starts to stick, with people, in both parties across the aisle. We're educating each other, we're learning, and eventually, sometimes we actually learn enough to pass a bill. So that's, and this year, we have just started to get legislative service requests. So these basically are requests for bills that legislators have proposed. So there have been 30 of them that have been, I'll pass this around. This is information that's actually all available on the General Court website, but what I actually did was I went and looked specifically for the environmental bills. There are about 1,000 bills out there so far. So these are the equivalents of the ones that we were kind of tracking and looking at last year. But some of these are going to sound familiar, and I'll read a few of them. Eliminating the statute of limitations on civil actions related to damage caused by PFAS. That's something that we've seen before. Requiring permit applications for new landfills to contain a detailed plan for leachate management. Basically, I think one of the things that we all were educated on over the last couple of years is basically the danger of garbage juice and what's in it. And what's in it typically is a lot of PFAS and stuff that we don't want leaking into groundwater. The moratorium for processing and approving new landfills will be back on the table this year. Increasing penalties for violations of the Shoreland and Water Protection Act. So that was something I think that we actually did last year too. There was another bill that passed that. There's another bill that would actually look at tightening those regulations even more. Let me see. Just a bunch of bills related to landfills. Another one recognizing the fundamental right of the people of New Hampshire to have clean water and a healthy environment. And one of the things at this point is that all we have are the titles of the bills. So unless you're a co-sponsor or a sponsor, we don't actually have the actual bills. So there's a bill called Relative to lead paint poisoning prevention and remediation. It sounds great. I know the sponsor, she's wonderful. I have no idea what's in her bill and what she's proposing. So all of these bills will actually, what you see on the left, this is the legislative service request number. And to the right of that, there's a column that says HB or SB, that stands for House Bill or Senate Bill. Over the next few weeks, all of these will be assigned bill numbers. And once they're assigned bill numbers, the bills will actually be up on the general court website. So you can actually go in and take a look at any of these. But I think on the plus side, we're seeing a lot of energy and activity in this area. I think on the downside, one of the things that we have to do at the state level is I think we always have to be aware of the fact that at the national level, the desire for regulation and the kind of help that the EPA gets sort of ebbs and flows. And I think that, and I think ultimately, it's important for us to realize that there are things that we can do as a state to actually nudge the EPA along. We actually had PFAS MCLs in New Hampshire that were much stricter than the EPA levels. That's something we did at the state level. So we can do things like that. And I think the thing that nobody really could foresee is there probably would have been people who probably would have pushed for a lot more if we would have kind of known where the election was going to go. So I think one of the things that we'll see a fair amount of activity at the state level in 2025, but we'll probably see a lot of activity at the state level in 2026.
Does anyone have any questions?
I can comment. Exactly what Representative Buse is talking about, that could be complemented with public education where you don't have to regulate anything. You can just tell the people who want to listen how to be better consumers, how to look out for these products, and how to sort of go toward the goal that you're trying to get at with legislation. If you can get a, sort of popular opinion to already be supporting it, it will go even further. So education.
This is the last part of our meeting, public comment. I know we don't have any members of the public here. Do we have anybody online? Okay. Any final questions before we close out the meeting?
I just want to make a comment.
Sure.
I was in Boston. I went to the Metropolitan Waterworks Museum, which is right at the where the reservoir is in Cleveland Circle, if you're familiar with Boston. It's fabulous. It's a pumping station that it was a steam pumping station that was built in the 1880s. And it's an amazing facility. I was talking to the guy who was giving a lecture on it, and I asked him about PFAS and the Boston water system. He says they don't really have much. It's not a problem there. Their water comes from the Quabbin, which is way out there. So I guess the Quabbin is pretty well protected. But go to that museum. It's a lot of fun.
All right, thanks for letting us know.
Yeah.
Councilor Layla?
I'll just add that all the outdoor sports teams at the high school are now drinking filtered water because of this group.
Yeah.
The head trainer, Shamara, she was very excited about that. And, she's running around like, it's filtered water, it's filtered water. So, I just want to share that.
Is that because of the lead?
We mentioned it whenever we had Mr. Litchi in, we had the schools in, and we had asked about what about what they fill up all the sports teams jugs with, and they went and checked out, it wasn't filtered, and now it is.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And there's another thing too, is that the fire chief told me that they've ordered PFAS-free fire protection clothing.
That's great too.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure, because our first responders, they're exposed to a lot as
Oh, yeah.
firefighters, so the very gear
Well,
that
the
protects
suits-
them should not be exposing them to toxic
The
chemicals. So that's
suits they
great.
wear are just basically PFAS.
Yeah, yep. So, that's great. Yeah.
Andrew, I can send you this. I should have done it before the meeting.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, you send it out, I'll circulate it to the group. Yeah, thank you.
So I can put it on the website.
Thank you so much. Well, everybody have a safe and happy holiday. And we'll be in touch after the new year for probably a meeting in maybe like February or March. Okay? All right, thank you so much for coming.
Take care. Yeah.